Welcome, everyone, to the XojoTalk podcast. I'm Paul Lefebvre, the Xojo Developer Evangelist, and this time my guest is Craig Boyd. Craig writes the database column for XDev magazine and is a data architect. Craig, welcome to XojoTalk.
Thanks, Paul. Glad to be here.
Well, like I usually do with people on XojoTalk, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about how you came to use Xojo and what you use it for?
Yeah, sure. So I started using Real Basic back around 5.5. I'm not sure what year that is.
That would have been 2004.
Okay, so yeah, that sounds about right. I was looking for something to write some utilities in that I needed to, some database scripts. And I came across Xojo and thought, this looks like something I could use pretty easily. And it connected to databases really easy. It wasn't real complicated. I messed around with .NET for a little bit, and I didn't like all the plumbing. Kind of reminded me of the scene from Star Trek, Search for Spock, where Scotty has stopped the Excelsior by just pulling out 8 little nuts and bolts. And he says, the more complicated the plumbing, the easier it is to stop it up. And that just kind of sums up .NET for me. But anyway, I started messing around with it there and started using it more and more for my own kind of applications and utilities, not anything that anybody else would care to use. And over time just grew to really like it and love it. And so now I use it for all kinds of helper things. I've got a couple database tools that I can use with Xojo and kind of automate them a little bit. So it's really a big help to me in my day-to-day life.
So it's kind of your little magical toolkit that you use for doing stuff to help you get work done.
It really is.
Yeah, that's pretty similar to how I started using it. Is I was doing database development back in the early 2000s, primarily, I guess, Power Builder and Oracle. And I came across this because I wanted to make some apps on my Mac and ended up using it at work for stuff that we weren't, not for the products we were selling, but for tools to help to connect it to the Oracle databases or that processed other data that would then be used by other apps and stuff like that. And it was way faster than whipping out those things trying to use Power Builder or then later .NET. Because as you said, those things have a lot of plumbing.
They really do.
Yeah, and they just had so much overhead when you're just trying to make an app that, maybe you wanted to hand off to one of the business analysts or the testers or the doc writers to use to do something to help them with their job. And you're like, well, geez, I don't want to, build this full-blown app with all this deployment crap just to hand off to them then they're going to run it, a couple times a week or something.
Yeah. Yeah, probably my favorite app that I've written with it has been a report to tell database or the developers in the group what has changed in the database since the last release. And so it actually goes through and looks at a snapshot and then looks at the current picture of the database and spits out a spreadsheet with all kinds of highlighting that shows what's changed, what's new, what's gone. Makes life so much easier for everybody.
And does it do that from a schema or a data or both perspective?
It actually reads from an Irwin file.
Okay. Yeah, I've used Irwin. For people that haven't, that's a data modeling tool that lets you draw pretty pictures of your database.
Yeah. Sometimes I joke that some people just want us to draw lines and boxes.
Yeah. So what sort of databases primarily are you working with?
Right now, I primarily work on Oracle and Netezza and SQL Server. But I've worked on DB2 and, Informix, Postgres, MySQL, just about all of them at some point in time or another.
Okay, I didn't catch the name of the one you said after Oracle.
Netezza.
Yeah, I've not heard of that. Netezza?
Netezza. Netezza.
I've definitely.
It's actually a data warehouse utility.
Oh, okay.
Kind of black box, kind of like Green Plum or some of the others, where you can roll this thing out real quick and easy and build a data warehouse. It's more of a columnar database as opposed to table and relationships.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, it doesn't support relationships at all.
Yeah, that would make sense if it's more for data warehousing. Okay, well, that's pretty cool. And you connect with or have connected with all of those using Xojo.
Most of those I have. Yeah, actually, I have. I have connected to Netezza with Xojo, and it works just fine. It uses the ODBC driver.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's a pretty handy little thing for connecting to databases that Xojo doesn't natively know anything about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we before this we were talking a little bit. I used the ODBC driver in a client project years ago to talk to a DB2 database that was running on, I think, iSeries is what the client called it. And you were correcting me before because I had no idea what that really meant.
Yeah, the iSeries was previously known as the AS400. I actually did admin work on those for a while, and programming in RPG and COBOL.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. And RPG is actually really a nice language, but that's it's not object-oriented at all, or at least it wasn't back then. Very procedural. But yeah, iSeries DB2, you couldn't have a column name that was any longer than 8 characters long, and table names couldn't be more than, I think, 10.
Those sound familiar.
Yeah, and so as a result, you would end up with these ugly, ugly column names.
Well, that would explain some of the stuff I was seeing, because I was building an app that would kind of pull some source data from there into a SQLite database for offline use. And
yeah,
I was just befuddled at some of the strange conventions they had for naming things. And, I wasn't like saying, why the heck do you do it this way? But internally, I was thinking that.
Yeah. Well, and if they were there's a couple tools out there that will auto-generate code, and it will also auto-generate the database as well. And so it uses basically those 8 digits for a coded lookup. So the first 2 is a prefix for the subject area. So if it was purchase orders, it might be PO, and then a sequence number, and it just got really crazy.
Wow, yeah, that explains a lot. That's surprising. But I guess that database has probably been around forever, much like Oracle, and probably has a lot of historical baggage associated with it.
Yeah, it really does. On the iSeries, the database is actually integrated into the operating system. So if you upgrade the operating system, you also upgrade the database at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but that's different from the way it's implemented on the mainframe. On the mainframe, it's a separate software application, and it doesn't have the same limitations that it does on the iSeries.
But they call them all the same name.
They do. It's crazy. And their flavor for AIX and Windows is still yet more different from the others. And so I don't get it. It's crazy.
Huh. Well, yeah, I mean, at least... No, I can't say at least, but I mean, it always seems like Oracle was Oracle, no matter where you used it.
Yeah.
At least back when I used it, which is at this point is going on, it's been 10 years since I've used that thing, day to day. So I'm definitely behind the times, but that's what I recall anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I love Oracle. Of any of the databases, that's my favorite.
Yeah, when I worked with Oracle, I can't say that I loved it at the time. I did do a lot of stored procedure development with it.
Oh, yeah.
And when I ended up moving on to .NET and then working more with SQL Server, I appreciated SQL Server's better. I guess it was simpler to work with, had much better tools and control panels and stuff like that. But it's I didn't find its stored procedure language to be very nice. So I didn't like that aspect of it. But when we were building .NET apps, we tended not to rely as heavily on stored procedures, so it didn't prove to be as big a problem.
Sure.
But with Oracle, we relied very heavily on stored procedures, which was tedious at the time. Those were difficult to debug and interface and stuff. What was that? You said it was one of the strengths of Oracle?
Yeah, one of the strengths is their stored procedures.
Ah, yeah.
They execute very, very well.
Yeah, using those, we were able to get some significant performance improvements on, databases that had, millions of rows and stuff like that. really get things down to be pretty speedy.
Oh, yeah.
So you've been writing the database column for XDev magazine. That's the Xojo developer magazine. I'm going to guess for like 3 years or so.
Yeah. I was looking at that the other day, and I think it's actually like 2.5 or 2 3/4, something like that. So pretty close to 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm only, yeah, that's probably right. And I'm remembering this. The reason I'm smiling when I remember this is because Craig took over the column from me.
Yes, I did.
When is at the time I had just started at Xojo. This would have been like 2012. And some point, like 6 months later, I was writing 3 columns for the magazine. Yeah. I was writing the database column, the web column, and then my XojoTalk column. And I talked to Mark and I said, I can't keep this up. And I had written the database column since issue 2.
Really? I didn't realize you'd written it that long.
Yeah, when he originally started the magazine, this would have been in 2002. He had sent an email out to the community and said, hey, I'm going to be starting a magazine. I'm looking for columnists. Send me ideas for columns. I'm going to go through them and pick stuff and we'll get going. And the magazine came out with issue 1 sometime in summer of 2002. And I had sent the proposal in to do a database column because at the time, that's primarily what I used Real Basic for. Yeah. And he, at that point, I guess it was a little too late, and he already had his columnist slots filled. So he emailed me and said, I like this, but I probably won't be able to run it regularly. And then he released the magazine. I think he said it was at Macworld New York back when they were still doing those. And after he got back from that, he called me up and he said, Paul, the only thing everybody was asking me about was a database column. You're in the next issue and every issue after that. So I've written in every issue of that magazine except for the very first issue.
Wow, that's actually very impressive.
Yeah, it's hard. I am not always on time. I have to frequently, my emails to him are, sorry I'm late, and then the column follows. But
I am so glad you confessed that because I'm probably just a little bit better than that, but not much. I think in the last 2.5 years, I've gotten 4 columns in on time or ahead of time. All the rest are like probably 2 or 3 weeks before the deadline or before he has to publish.
All right, 4? You're blowing me away. I say my number is 0. maybe one, but usually I forget. Like I think he just sent a reminder out now for he wants columns by the end of July, and yeah, he tries sending the reminders earlier than late, and it doesn't matter. I still forget, and then it's like, oh crap, I was supposed to get that article to Mark last week, and boom, I'm trying to hurry up and come up with a topic and write an article, but yeah. It's a little easier for me now. I mean, the database columns were, harder. You had to come up with some topics and, do some research and stuff like that. And your database columns are longer than mine ever were, so you must have to put a lot more work into them. I end up spending close to 6 hours on a column, maybe 7, depending upon what's going on. Just because I like to kind of dig into what I'm doing so it doesn't come across as... get the emails that say, oh, you forgot this. And so I like to be as thorough as I can in that length of space that I have. That's what I was going to say. Thorough would be the word I describe for your columns, is they cover everything right there. Mine would be much more of a slice through the top kind of thing. But, I really enjoy the writing aspect of it, too. To just sit down and think and put the pen to paper is a wonderfully cathartic for me. Very relaxing. Yeah, it's definitely fun to write like that. And it's beneficial for lots of other things. I mean, communication is just so key to every part of someone's work life, particularly in technology. And so many people are bad at it. Yes. So it's just good practice. It is. And so I enjoy it. Well, that's good. I hadn't talked to you too much before. We met for the first time at XDC this past April, I guess it was. Yeah. And and now I'm learning. I didn't realize you had such an extensive database background. I suppose I kind of knew it based on what you were writing and the level of detail and stuff. But I didn't realize you've apparently used every database system known to man.
Well, okay, that's probably a bit of a stretch.
It didn't sound like it.
Well, okay, in all fairness, I think Firebird popped up on the forums here not too long ago. And so I downloaded that for the first time and just fired it up and went, oh, that's interesting, and then shut it back down.
Well, so you've used it. You can add that to your list.
No. No, I wouldn't add that one to the list. So there's at least a handful that I haven't used. I've used pretty much all the commercial ones. I really hadn't used the Valentina products much. And from what I hear, most people kind of like those.
I have used those once with a client project quite a while ago. And yeah, they're neat. They're very speedy. They have, I think, like 3 different ways to communicate with the database. You can use the Xojo database API, and I think they got a couple other ones. One's more object-based, and I don't remember what the other one is. So it depends on how the app was designed. I was taking over development of one. I found that some of the installation was a little trickier, and the docs were dense. I think the docs were written by non-English speakers, so they're a little hard for English folks to kind of plow through. But
sure.
There's a lot of, if you know how to do a database, you can usually figure it out. And I think Valentina might be columnar, though.
I think you're right. I seem to remember reading that somewhere.
So I seem to recall it had something that was weird. I don't remember what it was now, but there was some that you would always see in any relational database, but Valentina didn't have it. But it did have super speed for lots of stuff, so that's always good. And it's still around, still works great with Xojo. And
oh yeah,
and they do make now a popular reporting product that can be used to generate some slick reports that work with Xojo. Yeah,
I remember reading a little bit about that. And that's something that I know that's kind of a thing within the community is we all really wish Xojo would come out with a better reporting tool, but they just hadn't seemed to been able to get around to that yet.
Yeah, the reporting tool that's in Xojo now is, pretty basic. It can do for some simpler type reports, but when you dig into some of the more complicated business reports, you may end up finding that, it's not quite going to cut it, so you got to do it yourself or look around for something at third party. But luckily, there are some people that have built some stuff that people can grab onto. Yeah, Firebird, what you mentioned earlier, was something, I think I had looked that up a little while ago, because I did a blog post on how to connect to Firebird from Xojo, and I used ODBC, but the only problem I had with that is I could not, at the time, find an ODBC driver on the Mac side, so I could only connect to it from Windows.
Oh. Well, that's one of the interesting things about Windows to me is, for whatever reason, all the ODBC stuff just seems to be there for Windows and easy to find and easy to get. Whenever I've tried it on Linux, it always seems to be a huge pain.
I don't think I've ever gotten ODBC to work on Linux.
Yeah, I think I did get an ODBC connection on Linux to a SQL server working one time, but that was a while back.
Yeah, you have to put things in certain secret places and edit certain secret files, and then and I just haven't had enough success, and I'm not in Linux enough to be able to intuit where these things might be or what's going wrong. So
yeah.
But yeah, ODBC on Windows is amazingly easy, and you can find an ODBC driver for just about anything. Without looking very hard. And everyone, like I said, that's what I used to connect to iSeries. A little digging around an IBM site eventually led me to an ODBC driver that worked just fine.
Oh yeah.
And the Firebird driver worked just fine. I just downloaded and installed it. Didn't have to do anything special. And then Xojo connected right to it. Worked like a charm. I think back when I was originally connecting to Oracle back in 2002, I used the ODBC driver back then because it wasn't a native Oracle driver. So yeah, it's very handy. I really like using it for stuff like that. I've used it to connect to FoxPro for clients whose projects I've migrated in the past.
Oh yeah,
very handy. But yeah, I just wish that on the Mac side it would be easier to set these things up. But take what you get, I guess.
Yeah.
And well, speaking of Windows. You are a Windows user primarily, is that right?
I am. I split my time between Windows and Linux. So at work, it's all Windows, and at home, it's all Linux, except when I have to work on one of my kids' laptops. I can't get them to switch over to Linux yet because some of the curriculum that they have that they use during the school year is on Windows only. So they have to stick with that.
You just set them up with a VM and you put Windows on that, and then they can.
Yeah, and I thought about that, but that's a lot of extra steps for a 13-year-old and a 12-year-old to do just to run a math program for 30 minutes.
Okay, well maybe you have a point, but
yeah. Well, like I said, I went down that road mentally anyway for about 10 minutes and went, yeah, I can't do that to them.
Well, on the Windows side, and we'll talk about Linux a little bit after that. So what are your thoughts on the upcoming Windows 10, which is scheduled to start rolling out on the July 29th? Are you thinking that's something at work you're going to be testing, switching to? Have you already been looking into it?
I have not looked into that yet at all. I don't, business-wise, work-wise, I don't really see Windows 10 hitting us anytime soon. I probably would guess that 2 years from now, we'll start seeing it show up more and more on the server side. And then
really?
Probably in another 2, it'll start hitting the desktops more.
So you think the server will get it first? Interesting.
Yeah, I do, because people tend to go to the newer things for servers so that they can get the latest patches and updates. And as they deprecate Windows 7 and Windows 8, well, not really 8, but Windows 7, they'll skip 8 and go to 10, I imagine.
Yeah, I expect that jumping from 7 to 10 is the way people are going to go. I imagine there's a lot of enterprise customers that are still on 7 right now and never wanted to do the jump to 8.
Yes, I would 110% agree with that.
I really think I get the impression that Microsoft is going to be pretty aggressive on pushing 10 and trying to get, certainly consumers are probably going to upgrade pretty quickly to it, but I think enterprise is, really where Microsoft's cash cow is, but I get the feeling they're going to be kind of aggressive there too and trying to get their enterprise customers upgraded.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But just as far as the regular laptop and desktop users, I think it'll be at least 3 years before you really can walk into any business and go, oh, that's Windows 10. I think most of them will continue running 7, and then maybe a few will switch to 8, and then they'll go to 10. But, I've been in IT for 20 years, and I haven't seen any kind of mass jump onto an operating system like that.
Yeah, you're probably right from an organization as a whole. I'd say, actually, you're definitely right. I just have to remember back when I'm thinking back is that, I've always been on the development team and an early adopter.
Oh, yeah.
So, in my case, it's been like, how much longer, it just came out. How long do I got to wait? Like a week? I don't want to wait a week. And
yeah.
I was one of the first people when Vista came out to put Vista on my development machine.
Oh, bless your heart!
When I was doing .NET development at the time, yeah, that was just so foolish when I think back. Yeah. I did that, and then I think I might have put the 64-bit version too, and I had video card driver issues. Because at the time I had a dual monitor set up, and we had, I don't remember what we had for machines, but they weren't super sophisticated. And I had managed to rig up a dual monitor setup by scouring a different video card off of some other dead machine. So I had two different video cards in this tower. And
you changed the IRQ settings to make sure they wouldn't interfere. And
they didn't interfere, but they were different brands, which worked perfectly fine with XP. But Vista, no, your two cards had to be the same brand, or you couldn't run them.
Really?
So I lost a monitor, boom, right out of the box. And that didn't make me happy. And then what made me even less happy was there was issues with Visual Studio running on Vista, which you're like, what? Both of those are made by Microsoft. But the version of Visual Studio I was using at the time would not properly run. I think it might have been a 64-bit version of Vista incompatible with the 32-bit version of Visual Studio. I forget now. This was like 10 years ago or more. But
yeah.
It was not a good, pleasant experience. The only thing that kind of saved me was I had a backup laptop at the time that I kept with XP, and
Oh, that was smart.
I used that for about a month and a half while the other issues got addressed. If I remember right, Vista was rolled out in 2 phases, so it came out to enterprise people first. And I did wait a few months before I rolled it out, but I didn't wait long enough.
Well, I will confess a little sin here. I actually stayed on XP up until about 2.5 years ago.
Ah, goodness. Yeah, no, I can't. I still have an XP VM sitting around here somewhere, but I don't know the last time I started it.
Yeah, I've got one of those too, just in case.
Yeah, hey, you keep it around until it doesn't start anymore, and then you're like, oh, well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have Windows 10 running in a VM now. I've been running all the tech previews for testing and playing around and seeing stuff. And it's not bad. I think I'll probably switch to it, almost immediately. But, I have multiple VMs, and, I can just flip between them as needed. So
sure,
if something bad happens, I just say, all right, well, why don't we hold off on that one? I was worried, though, when I did the last technical preview update. It downloaded everything, did its little... okay, I'm going to restart now. And it's really weird because Windows 10 talks to you in the first person.
Really?
So the messages all say, I'm going to restart your computer now. And you're like, who are you?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Hal. I can't open the door.
But so, it told me it was going to restart, and then it restarted, and then it said, I'm applying updates now or something like that. And then it just froze. And I had forgotten to do a snapshot before, of course. And I'm like, oh, God, if this completely hosed, it's not the end of the world. I don't have anything on the VM, but then I'll have to download the ISO and do a wipe and reinstall everything. And, who wants to do that?
No, that's just painful.
So I just went to the VM menu and I just picked, shut the, I think I did like force power off or something and just restarted the VM, and it booted up and finished the installation and seems to be fine. So go figure.
Good for you.
Yeah, you never know. Oh yeah, and then, after that, that's right. After that finished installing, everything looked fine, but I couldn't click on anything. The mouse would move around on the screen, but I couldn't click on anything. Now,
well, that's kind of a problem in Windows.
Well, you'd think that'd be a problem, but I mean, Windows is pretty good about having by default keyboard control of most things. So I was actually able to run the OS via the keyboard without clicking, and to figure out, I don't know that I figured out specifically what the problem was, but I was able to do stuff like reboot and check some drivers and stuff like that. I ended up finding on the VMware site that I had to edit a configuration file that was on the OS X app bundle and tell it that my mouse was not a USB device, but was a keyboard device or something. And then once I did that and, reset and restart everything, it started working. But
oh, no, that's crazy.
yeah, I've never had to do that before. But, I am dealing with a beta OS. So, I suppose things like that will happen.
Yes, betas are known for being odd.
Yeah, and now I'm running the beta of OS X, but only in a virtual machine as well, because, that's the place to test these things. If something bad happens, you just delete it and start over.
Yeah, that's, the VM, the whole virtual thing has really saved a lot of time and headache and heartache, I think.
Yeah, I agree. You must use that a lot for databases.
Yeah, actually, where I'm at right now, if we want a new development environment, we basically go out to a catalog and say, give me one from column A, one from column B, and one from column C, and punch run, and it builds the machine for us. And then 10 minutes later, we've got a dev environment.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just great to be able to just spool up something that quickly.
Yeah, that whole virtualization stuff is fabulous.
Yeah, I first got hooked on that. I might have been like 2007 or so. I was still doing .NET work primarily, and then I was using Microsoft tools, and we were moving over for source control from CVS. I don't know if you ever heard of CVS.
Yes, I'm familiar with CVS.
And we were switching to Microsoft's Team Foundation server, which I think has a different name now. So, and I was in charge of that project, and we had a dedicated server that was hosting CVS. And when I was doing all the research for the Team Foundation server, I was like, Microsoft, because we had MSDN stuff, and Microsoft gives us all these tools, and we're not using them. We should see if they can help. And it turned out the virtualization software was just a great way to take and then get some new racks in and then partition them differently. And it ended up being a much better way to manage all that. And taking the backups is just much, much better.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who does consulting, and he moves all of his clients to VMware. And so their desktops just basically go into the VM cloud, and they start up their machines or they leave them running and they log on to those, and that's where they do all their work. He says it has saved him so much time.
Yeah, they can't mess anything up, really.
No, And if they do, it's not a big deal. You just drop it and recreate it.
Well, speaking of messing things up, you said at home you primarily use Linux.
I do. I love it.
And you love it. That's. I don't think I got that from you when we were talking at XDC. So you must have talked a bit with Kevin Culley.
Oddly enough, he and I did talk for a while, but I don't know that Linux ever came up. Beekeeping came up.
He loves talking about his bees, yeah. But he usually always somehow will switch from bees to Linux because they're related in some way. But
I wasn't aware of that connection. Now I get the connection between Linux and penguins, but not bees. That's a new one.
So you use Linux at home. So you run this on special computers that you build, or you just and what distributions are you working with?
Primarily, I use Kubuntu. That's my favorite.
Okay.
Although I just got in a new hard drive, one of the hybrid ones that's part SSH or SSD and the regular. Mm-hmm. And that one I'm actually loading with Linux Mint.
That's the one I primarily use.
Yep. Yeah, that one I really like. And so I think I'm going to end up switching to that one because I've been messing around with it in some of the VMs, and it seems to play nicer with Xojo than any of the others.
Yeah, Mint, I don't know what it is, but it seems to have a much faster graphics subsystem that really is working much better with Xojo than some of the other distributions.
Yes, I would agree 110% on that one. So anyway, I think I'm going to switch to that. Now, my machine has 8 gig of memory, so it'll be 64-bit that I install, so it'll be interesting to see how it behaves there. But I'll keep spinning up the 32-bit ones just for futzing around in Xojo.
Right, yeah. With Mint, from what I've heard from people, you can get Xojo running on 64-bit Mint without as much work as some other ones. I think what people have been doing if they run into something where they can't get the library to pull down and install is they fire up a 32-bit VM within the 64-bit OS and run what they need that way. Again.
Yeah, and that's what I do.
Yeah, VMs to the rescue again.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I've been using Linux for about the same amount of time that I've been using real basic Xojo, and it's come a long, long ways. They have made vast improvements in the OS, and to me, it's just a real fun operating system. I love being able to open up a terminal and start typing and get stuff done rather than having to click and hunt and peck and do all that sort of thing.
Well, that's fascinating. Well, yeah, you should definitely get in touch with Kevin and chat Linux stuff, as I know he's always a big proponent of Linux and loves talking about it with people.
Yeah, he and I talked. Like I said, we talked for a while at XDC, and I really enjoyed his company. So I need to reconnect with him. Now, do you use OS X as well? You know what? We just bought our first Mac, and it's my wife's computer, and so I kind of let her go first in that way. But we're learning together more or less on that one.
Okay,
but I like it.
So at home, you're gonna have all three now. You're gonna have an OS X machine. You got some Windows machines that the kids use. You got your Linux machines.
Yeah, we've got a little bit of everything. It's great fun.
A true geek's heaven is playing with all those things.
Yes, yeah, and it's funny, but my wife, she looks at me and goes, why couldn't you have been one of those geeks that likes the toys instead of all the programming and stuff? Because she likes the toys. She thinks that's really cool. And I'm going, yeah, it's expensive to like all the toys, and B, I just don't have the time for that. I'd much rather spend it, writing code.
Well, one toy thing that might help in the future is the Raspberry Pi stuff that Xojo will be able to build to.
Oh, yes, I've got one.
You already have a Raspberry Pi, yeah.
Yes, two actually.
And yeah, those are kind of often used to interfaces to control geek toys, if you will. And
oh yeah.
So maybe there'll be some way you can merge the two to make your wife happy.
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, I use one of them right now for basically a media player.
Yep, that seems to be a common thing people use those for.
Yeah, works great. Now I've got a couple ideas and things that I may give a shot with Xojo on once I can compile to that target.
Neat. Yeah, we've got a lot of people that have their Raspberry Pis that are just waiting to work on different ideas they've been jotting down. So we're excited to get that out for people to play with. All right, so you're down in Texas, if I recall correctly.
I am down in Texas. I am in far north Dallas in a little city called Little Elm.
Okay. Not that I've heard of that, but so it's in the Dallas area. That'll certainly pinpoint it.
It is. We sit between Frisco and Louisville Lake, basically.
Okay. Well, that's quite a weather difference from here. Then I was telling Craig, for our listeners beforehand, is pretty much since XDC I've had some sort of cold or sinus infection nonstop, and I told him I'm blaming the Texas air on it until further notice. So
yeah, that's just silly.
Hey, I don't know. I've been to Texas before, though. That's the weird thing. So obviously it probably can't be that, but.
Yes, exactly. You need to move down here and just get acclimated.
Well, I certainly think I may appreciate the heat, but it's been a chilly summer even up here in the Northeast. So I think tomorrow the temperature is supposed to break 80. So that'll be exciting.
Well, good for you. We've been in the 90s for a while now.
90. I think we actually hit 90 once this year. Back in May of there's been plenty of summers where it's never hit 90 here.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a whole nother world when you go 1,000 miles north.
Yeah, funny how that works.
All right, well, I'm just checking over our list, but is there anything else you wanted to bring up or talk about?
The only other thing I'd like to add is that XDC was a wonderful experience. It was so much fun to be able to get out and meet so many people that I had chatted with in the forums and listened to online, and it was just fabulous. I kind of kicked myself that I haven't stayed in touch with anybody or very few people since then, but it was great. If you haven't had a chance to go, I would encourage you to go. I know you've gone. I'm speaking broadly to the audience, right? Right,
you're speaking to the listeners. Yes. I've been to a lot of them, as you might imagine. But I got to echo Craig's comments. XCC is wonderful. It's fabulous hanging out with everybody and chatting and talking about stuff and showing code and asking questions, and it's definitely a blast. And for people that aren't aware, it was recorded this past year, and I'm told the recordings are very, very close to being finished, and will be made available to XDC attendees and others as well soon. So, I don't know exactly when this podcast will be published, but, maybe they'll be out by the time the podcast published. Who knows? But it should be right around there.
Right.
So, yeah, there'll be a lot of material. There's something like 30 to 40 hours of sessions that are recorded with lots of varying topics. So it should be pretty good.
Yeah, there were a lot of great sessions there.
All right. Well, Craig, I want to thank you for being on XojoTalk.
Well, thank you for having me, Paul. I've enjoyed it.
And I want to remind our listeners that be sure to subscribe to XojoTalk on the links that are in the blog post or in your show notes. You can do that on iTunes or direct from your podcast client of choice. And that is helpful information for us to track and know how many people are listening to the show. So thanks everyone for listening.